Hello and welcome to this episode of Star Revelations podcast with Maria Jones and me, Morgana Sophia. Maria, welcome once again. And today, more importantly, we have our very first guest, a guest who we have been desperate to have on our podcast since we started it. And I'd love to introduce you all to Seren Bertrand, an award-winning author on feminine magic, wisdom, a storyteller, spirit keeper, enchantress. She has published several amazing books, including Womb Awakening, The Mary Magdalene Mysteries, and my personal favourite, Spirit Weaver. Seren, welcome. Thank you so much for bringing your magic from the mountains.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here, especially with a Yorkshire lass and a Midland lass. I don't often get such a joy and privilege.
It's really, really wonderful for you to be here and for us to chat just before we're starting to record about all our favourite places in the north and Yorkshire, which is a very special place for us all. So yeah, it was amazing. Maria, I do believe you're going to kick us off today.
Yes. So I was really feeling into what would be really intriguing for our listeners to hear about, drawing from your incredible body of work, Seren. And we obviously focus a lot on astrology on this podcast, and I know that you have a really deep relationship with Lady Saturn and Saturnian magic. So I thought a great place to start would be for you to maybe share your thoughts on Lady Saturn as a feminine archetype and why she is so important at this time, from a feminine leadership perspective.
Okay, thank you. You know what? And I'm going to set a little bit of context for this first, in the sense that I believe that the full path of astrology has not yet been revealed. I feel that we know that when we look on the ancient mysteries, it was such a key pivotal. It was the centerpiece, and then it was destroyed, and still to this day demonized, which is kind of insane. That we are actually physically receiving the transmissions, like it or not, from these planetary bodies. Like, we are part of an actual creation together in relationship and entanglement. And there is something so forbidden about that even to this day, people get pushback on astrology, including tarot, as to me, a form of that kind of pattern recognition. So I'm starting with that to say that for me, the way I relate to things is in that spirit of inquiry and curiosity in feminine magic, of what is left to reveal about this path of astrology from a feminine embodiment sense. And the first thing that I feel like, why I think so many, like, there are the people who are the astrology nerds, and I feel like usually they're the people who are being called to the path of teacher, guide, teacher, initiator. So they're just going to know everything about astrology. But like, from the other side, for a lot of people, astrology can feel overwhelming, right? And I know I'm signed up to kind of quite a few astrology newsletters, social media sites. And we all know, like, when an eclipse is coming, like, there's this deluge of information and energies. But then bizarrely, they're changing every day. So just as you're like, okay, I'm in the Venus, and then 3 days later, everyone's like, now it's Saturn. You're like, okay, gear change, and there is this, it's like an avalanche of energy and information. So one of the things that I ponder and I teach in my work in feminine magic, I think this is the missing piece for women, is that we have been taught as women now to expand, to open, and to receive more, to give more, to be more, to know more. Like, it's a more world. And actually feminine energy in one of its most powerful qualities. So, you know, tuning into, if you're a leader or you want to embody your feminine power, actually the qualities of containment and contraction and screening and gating and being able to hold a territory, which is like an aspect of queenship, is really important. And so I think about this with astrology, and it's a little bit like, you know, with our body, when you go out, you know, you leave your front door, you're actually bombarded by energies from the ecology, from the ecosystem. Like a billion things are happening all at once. The bees are doing things, the flowers are doing things, the roots are doing things, the weather system, and actually all quite contradictory things, but they work together in a meta picture of the ecosystem that's kind of like a goddess level gnosis to be able to hold that. But for us as little humans, as little hobbitses going out, what our body and our feminine body, and this is why it's embodiment, is designed to do, is actually to gate out anything that is not relevant for you. So there is this way that, you know, you go out and there is this presence with the connection to the unspoken unity of creation that you belong to. And then the feminine knowledge is you don't have to say hello to everyone and give them a cup of tea and have a chat, or you wouldn't be able to get on with your life, right? So our nervous system and our oracular biology is designed to tune into threats and opportunities, you know, what we need to know, where we need to go, what the opportunity for nourishment is. And so I think that as humans, modern humans now, we're only just relearning this, right? We're only just relearning about our embodiment, our nervous system. We're part of an ecosystem. We know in healing, there's this sense of being, having your nervous system overwhelmed with too much energy and too much information, you know? So maybe this is a trauma-informed astrology. No, I don't really believe in those things. I think that life comes and ambushes you and hits you on the head, no matter what labels you put on it. But I think for me, this is the pretext. For me, it's the same with astrology. One of the reasons why I could never like really meet astrology was that cacophony of energies. And the way that in an embodied way, even though it's true in the unified, you know, astro ecosystem that we all belong to, that all these things are happening every day, every moment. The moon's shifting, the planets are shifting, the black holes are doing things. I think that what in a feminine magic journey and what our ancestresses practiced was this deep awareness of like, but what's important for me right now in my life, and to actually be able to gate out and screen out everything else, and to be able to tune into what you feel that real resonance with. And I think this is where kind of astro embodiment guides, you know, like yourselves, are really helpful to really help someone look at their chart, look at what's happening, and then in a literally just an immediate Gnostic way, figure out, yeah, you know, there's a million things you could be tuning into, but what is going to change the dial on your life? Who is calling? So for me, you know, like my journey started years ago when I lived in London with the moon. Just like remembering the moon, not in a ideas way, but like seeing her in the sky, like noticing, and then developing this relationship with her, to the point that she would come to me in my dreams. You know, I told the story, I had an incredible dream where I was at an ocean's edge and there was a full moon and I was walking the moon path over the water into the moon. And inspired by that, because I was going through difficult things at the time, I booked a journey to St. Ives in Cornwall, and I didn't consult the moon. You know, this was like the days before the internet and moon journals. It was like, it was actually kind of hard to get that kind of information that we're so used to now. And when I arrived, I went straight to the beach as you do the ocean, and I had not realized it was a full moon. So I stood at the edge of the ocean as the sun set, and it was dark, and there was the moon and a moon path, just like my dream. And so obviously a lot of womb awakening came from that really deep connection to the moon and the effect that the moon has on the female body in our cycles. And then I wrote Magdalene Mysteries. And though I didn't know it at the time, you know, I wouldn't name it, the presence of Saturn started to come to me, who I call Lady Saturn. And again, she came in a dream as I was writing Magdalene Mysteries in 2018. And again, this is like, I had no idea who Saturn, you know, it's not anything I'd read about or thought about. I think, you know, when you see, you know, I could see in like astro reviews, you know, that it was maybe some kind of male patriarch energy that, you know, was kind of maybe a negative energy, you know, like something to fear or not a great thing. That was like my only knowledge of Saturn. But when Saturn came to me in the dream, she was like film star, movie star. She was like dressed in black satin and black furs, and I always say she kind of had the vibe of Dita Von Teese, you know, and we were deep in the underworld. But again, you know, how it shifted a lot of things, I think, because there is a lot of mythological architecture around going to the underworld to be rebirthed. So we know with like Inanna, which I think is also an astro myth too in parts, but she descends to the underworld and is put on the hooks by Ereshkigal, you know, and then ascends back to the light. And so we have this with Persephone, you know, so a lot of the architecture of those myths is that the underworld is a place that you go to for healing, for grief, for initiation. You know, we associate it with painful events that we eventually learn something and then we ascend out into the light. But this underworld that Lady Saturn was in was like a nightclub. Like, you didn't want to ascend out of it. You were like, please, can I stay here? It was beautiful. It was luscious. It was dark velvet. And, you know, thinking about it now, like, you know, seeing your backdrop, it was like a terrestrial cosmos. Like, if we think when we look in the sky at night, you know, especially in a dark moon where we see the blackness and the stars, we're looking at the womb lining of the cosmic womb. And so down there in this deep underworld with Lady Saturn, it was like looking at the terrestrial womb lining of the underworld, like shimmering with crystals that match the stars. It was a place of beauty and enchantment. It was so incredibly feminine. But a kind of a feminine that we don't see in the world, because often now we associate the feminine, we associate the masculine with like structure and kind of strength and doing the thing, and then we associate the feminine, I guess, with the water energy somewhat, like flowing, giving. You know, I always say like all these pictures of, you know, all the priestesses in their white dresses, you know, at the water's edge in Costa Rica, dancing, you know, and that's beautiful. That's certainly like a part of it. Feels like these Venusian mysteries of the feminine, which I love and I'm all in for too. But this was like this new layer. It was like these Saturnian mysteries of the feminine. And And it's funny because I'm very practical, and it was also very embodied in the dream. What I noticed was that, and also because I used to work in fashion, that the clothes or the look Saturn had chosen to show up in were very tight, like tight high heel boots, like this skin tight dress. And in what happened in the dream when I met her, it's like I embodied her. I felt like, what would it be to move in that energy? And it's funny because my first thought is like, I can't walk. I don't feel free. You know, I don't feel expansive or liberated. I feel tight, structured, contained. It's like, you know, a bit like bondage, BDSM. You know, it's like someone's corseted me in. And then what, like on a body cue I got in my body is like that, you know, if you watch a panther stroll, like, and it's actually something slower and sensual, but very structural and very strong and very wise and very like knowing and humorous, that will give you a wink. And it's like, you know, it's like the kind of truth that will be ravishingly beautiful, but also give you a bit of a spanking. And so I met this being, and you know, and this was in 2018 as we were writing Magdalene Mysteries, and I woke up and I knew, it's like I was, it was just, it's such a glamorous energy. And that was the word that came, strict, glamorous. And then I now know that the word glamour is actually the old word for feminine wisdom. And so, you know, even like 500 years ago, say in a place like Scotland, if you were a feminine magic woman, your glamour would be your ancestral wisdom that you had inherited, which was like your power. And then at some point in the inquisitions and witch hunts, they turned glamour into a negative thing, like making the magic of women seem something like seductive and evil, and that you would, you know, use to harm people, rather than your glamour was like almost like your aura, your sum of all the magic you and your lineage had accumulated and embodied. So and so she was full of that kind of glamour, and that kind of glamour is very magnetic. It's that energy. It's like, I always say she's on a chaise longue, and like you come to her, she's not running to you, you know. And in terms of leadership, it's really interesting as well, because Lady Saturn is the energy that initiates queenship, but she in herself is more of like the artist or magician archetype, because she's not interested in interfering in like other people's business or running a you know, but she is the structure that makes that possible, and she is what initiates a person to be able to hold that kind of power and also embody magnetic energy. And so it's this very supremely feminine leadership, where it's not you riding out on a horse with your army and telling everyone what to do and busybodying across the world. It's like this, the sense of the throne as a magnetic center, like the throne of the earth, the womb of the earth, that has this incredible magnetic power to architect and structure creation, and to know all the precise like measurements and recipes. Like, so I always say my work, not a drop more and not a drop less, because in this kind of magic, dose is everything, which I think goes back to what we're saying about astrology. It's like a kind of, most people are throwing at you like a macro dose, and it's like, actually we really thrive when we know like exactly the amount that we're meant to receive, and we can embody it. So Yeah, so I met this person and this energy, this archetype, and this kind of power, and it introduced me to like this underworld that I'd this black yin velvet, glamorous, magical, feminine quality. And, you know, I later came to understand that Saturn, Lady Saturn, which we now think of as a man, and because who else could have that kind of deep power to structure and create things? And her energy is not the flowing maternal. She's the dark moon, you know, she is that power. Um, but yeah, you know, it's like, so as I came to know her and then like researched into her, you start to see that once upon a time, and I write about this, Saturn was a goddess. She was known as a goddess. And I'm sure you know, these beings can have multifaceted faces, right? So, and I think there is a face maybe that is the old structures. That could be one of her faces that she makes known when she wants to rebirth structures. She's like, wow, look, this structure is now out of date. It's not working for people. So we could interface with Saturn at that level. But the deeper level is coming down into her glamorous, magical, creative, structural, magnetic power and truth that she creates and structures new worlds and new templates, and that ultimately she is the dark womb. She is the womb of creation. She is in synergy with, you know, the womb of Earth, the womb of, you know, the galaxy, the black holes. Like Saturn holds some of these qualities, but in Saturn there is this deep quality of truth and precision and structure that maybe is not in other energies, but it's very sexy. So that's what I always say. It's like it's structure, but it's sexy structure. It's like, you know, I always say, why are women often attracted to that kind of BDSM energy? I'm not talking about like the full playing out of it, but just like the energy of like the black, the tight clothes, the kind of boudoir dweller, the Dita Von Teese, these types of archetypes, because they are so seductive and strict, but sexy and playful and magical too. So yeah, you know, Saturn also for me has a wicked sense of humor. You know, she's always laughing on her chaise longue, but then she can be really strict. So yeah, when you look back in history, you see it's like Saturn used to be the dark womb that all of abundance grew from. She comes first, and that is why she used to rule over the banks. The first banks were held in the name of Saturn, you know, because she's not the abundance in the sense of like harvest goddesses, or she is the fertility, she is the structure, she is the architecture, she is that primary magnetic energy that births everything, births all our abundance. So yeah, so I have journeyed with her since 2000, and again 2018, you know, and other energies pop in, but it's like a strict apprenticeship with her. I'm also very Venusian. I've got a lot of Venus, and I'm like, oh, let me get to the Venus part. You know, and she's like got her little manicured pointy nails saying no, 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 come back here. So yeah, and I've come to look out into the world and see that this is missing, and that women are missing this. And what I've seen, especially for spiritual, magical women, healing women, especially women who are in business, women who are wanting to engage with power structures, i.e. they want to run a business, they want to hold containers, they want to step into leadership, they want to have wealth, they want to build new structures. And what I've seen is that there was a whole wave of like this like Venusian lunar awakening in women. And then it kind of became like a bit of a damp squib, because the next step couldn't happen. And it needs this energy of Lady Saturn. That's why she's here now, to help women cross this threshold into true queenship, so they can hold positions of power, create new structures, be in leadership roles, but in this supremely feminine, magnetic way that's in tune with this energy in earth. Not like looking out at you know, the structures we've got now, or what passes for power now.
Yeah, I think for me, just when you were talking, there's that kind of undercurrent of that Babylon frequency. You can see her on the chaise longue with the, you know, the really
Yeah,
red lipstick, the red nails, kind of going
yeah,
for it. And
yeah,
the thing that really came up for me is that she's kind of giving us freedom within quite a tight framework to allow
yeah,
ourselves to express that power. Conversations I know Maria and I have had about this kind of you know, the lunar goddesses kind of, you know, walking through the fields of corn in the linen
yeah,
actually needed some kind of rooting and grounding. And I
yeah,
feel that Saturnia, or Lady Saturn, is very much coming into the women who are truly there to lead, rather than just to kind of, as you said, kind of expend their knowledge. It's almost as if she is coming in as a new archetype of leadership as we start to move
yeah,
away from this 3D matrix patriarchal structure that we have been bound by for the last goodness knows how long.
yeah. And you know what? I had this realization, revelation, you might say, in the lockdowns in COVID, where I decided to relate to our current structure, our current system that we call patriarchy, as an ancestor. Because I had a young baby, and when this system, however we feel about it, shut down, it was like the potential was there, that because I don't know how to build houses and ride horses and grow food. Like I'm not operating as a hunter-gatherer Neolithic village woman yet, and no one else as I know. Most people I know, for even for all their ideals, is like, you know, we just went through Hurricane Helene. Once the gas is out and you can't drive your car, and then you can't get to the supermarket to get the food, and even if you're growing your food, the thing you need to do that, you can't go to get, you know, because we're living in a very rural place. You start to see that even the structure now that we might not appreciate, it's like ancestral. It's like we might not appreciate some of the viewpoints of our ancestors. We wouldn't want to repeat that, but we must honor that they're our foundation. They help create us. To kind of hate on them is to hate on ourselves. So yeah, so I really, you know, that was one of those realizations into how powerful structure is, and how we've outsourced it to other people who we don't know, and we probably certainly don't agree with what they're doing. And so for me, it was a acknowledgement of the power of structure as an ancestor, and like that passing of the baton of like, wow, women need to become mistresses of this structure. This is our time, right? So that in a future, there will be a structure that's more organic, more resonant, more resilient, more in balance. But first, before we even get to that, we have to become apprentices to structure, even the structures that exist. And that was, you know, for me, one of the like the the you know, plot twist unfoldings, because before I, you know, came into feminine spirituality, I worked in women's media for a decade. So I've had this unusual experience that I worked in women's media for a decade, which was also all full of women talking about women's things, trying to empower women. And then I moved into women's spirituality, which is almost the same thing, identical things, but done in different ways. And I think that when I moved from women's media, which is very structural, very Lady Saturn, you know, very leadership, power bases, power dynamics, you know, when I moved into the more spiritual world, I thought it was all going to be running on beaches, like in flowing dresses. And as you said, lunar goddess, you know, when you're connecting deeply to these, like these very beautiful, illuminated, awakening, opening aspects of the feminine, you're like, I'm in. Sign me up for this forever, you know. And I guess I devalued my experience in women's media of like, oh, that was when I was not spiritual, you know. And what I started to see is actually was the two experiences needed to be put in a pot together. Because and I say this, it's crazy because there was epic amounts of bitchcraft in women's media, but it was so well done, right? And in women's spirituality, it was all hidden and lurking and shady and like slimy and sticky. And actually what I came to understand is you can learn a lot from that supreme initiated open bitchcraft that I witnessed and learned in, you know, in women's media, of just women who were unapologetically in their power, in their leadership. And, you know, some women held that incredibly, and they were my mentors. They were the people I learned from. They were the people now that I say I look back on as like high priestesses of creativity and black fire. And of course, I saw women hold that type of power badly, you know, hurtfully, in ways that I wouldn't wish to emulate. So because it was so open, I learned both ways, but just seeing how in that world, it was very structured, it was very ambitious. Women could do incredible things, and women had really no need to disguise their power and their genius and their success. It was in fact revered. And then, you know, when I went into the women's spirituality, there was all this, you know, a lot more love and a lot more connection and a lot more caring and a lot more freedom of emotion and vulnerability, like some really beautiful things. But what I ended up noticing was what was missing was all the other stuff. So almost parallel experiences, like in women's media. Oh, you could be the queen. They wanted you to be the queen. If you were making a lot of money, people would love you. If you were succeeding, people would admire you. But if you failed, you know, if you were down, if you were going through it, if you were vulnerable, like you were basically sent home in a taxi, you know, like do that in your own bedroom, get a doctor's note and come home, come back to work when you're, you know, when you can queen again. And whereas again, like then what I saw more in the feminine spiritual worlds under these like beautiful a lunar feminine, especially maternal energies, is like what an amazing place where you could actually come into vulnerability and truth and the fullness of who you were and not have to kind of you know, put that mask on. And I don't even mean that in a negative way. I just mean that when you're on the public stage, you're always a persona. That's how it is. And that in the woman's world, and you know, and again under the moon's influence and Venus's influence, we could create these spaces of intimacy and pleasure and caring and holding. But God forbid you become powerful or you become a leader or you start to make money or you start to get a lot of recognition, or that magnetic energy starts to form around like your crystal throne and bring energy to you. That would kind of upset the apple cart of that particular energy. So yeah, I saw that, oh, we need to merge these energies. I don't want to return to this world where there was none of this intimacy or integrity or vulnerability and openness and connection. but I don't want to have to sacrifice my genius or my power or my dreams, or also my and all the other women listening to this destiny as co-weavers to step forward in and to become the queens of a new economy and a new structure in a new way. And I think astrology for me, and I know you know, I've worked with Maria and had readings from Maria, for me, my mom, Orphea and Azra, because I love the way that astrology is like, it is a weaving together of energies. It is like a blueprint of a recipe of a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of that, you know, in balance. And then in our individual journeys, we go through the moment when it's the Venusian initiation, the moment when it's the lunar initiation, the moment when it's the Saturnian initiation. And then I think collectively we do that. So I think that maybe like 10, 15 years ago for women, there was more of a collective lunar and Venusian initiation happening. Still ongoing. It's a big journey. But now this like Saturnian energy has also stepped in to help teach us how to become these like magnetic mavens of structure and wealth and power and embodied leadership.
I really love that this topic has come up today of all days, because as we're recording, Venus and Saturn are actually in conjunction.
Amazing. I love that. You know, on my feminine magic school, we have this boudoir class, and I say it's like the conjunction of Venus and Saturn, because it's in this, like, you know, the you know, if you paint a picture, you're the boudoirs of women across time is where all the real action has happened, where we've greeted our lovers, where we've put our makeup on, where we, you know, our secret chambers, and how it's got that very Saturnian, like dark, sexy, but that Venusian, like glamorous, gorgeous, feminine pleasure. So yeah, so I love that Venus and Saturn together. I think that's a really strong energy rising.
It is, and it's beautiful that it's really happening in the sky as we're talking about this, because I think what you're sharing here is so important, and that's, you know, why it's also really important for us to reclaim Saturn as this feminine archetype. So we're really aware that, you know, this structure and this almost, you know, harsh discipline that Saturn can bring is something that we can also almost play with and find pleasure with if we learn how to dance with it.
And if we think of like what discipline is the right timeline, like that's how big her love is. Like she sees you trotting off down the wrong timeline, down the wrong path, about to meet disaster and misfortune or squander your gifts. And she gets a little whip out of her vast love for you, and just gently, like a mother panther with her cubs, nudges you back onto the right timeline. And that's why, as women, and I also call this the tower magic, because we know Mary Magdalene was called the Magdala, the watchtower, the tower. And tower energy is very structural, and it's an ascension model for women. It's not ascending out of the body into another world. It's ascending from the roots downwards through your throne into your power and your radiance and your destiny. And yeah, and so it's like this, you know, this tower path, why it's so powerful if you choose to take it, is like it loves you too much to let you make too many mistakes. And this is also mother love, and this is what I teach people. It's like we've become confused and polarized in the love a mother has for a young infant. Right? So when the baby is 6 months old, all the mom is doing is breastfeeding it, cuddling it, looking after its every needs. If the mother takes that same energy with her 18-year-old, that is not going to work. That is harmful, actually. So, you know, as we evolve through our rites of passage, personally and spiritually, this new aspect of the mother comes. And you know, and I try and share this with people, because it's not even the hot red, like angry. It's very cool and yin and very precise, and actually alignment feels good. And it's like, so this is what this energy does in her great love. If you devote to her, is you are going to get to the top of the tower. You are going to do extraordinary things with her guidance. And her guidance is actually at times like very motivational, and at times corrective. And again, I think we focus on the correction, but actually the motivation. She's like this, I call it, again in our work, we call it black fire. It's this energy, it's a yin fire. It's not the red hot yang fire. It's this black fire of the yin. It's like, you know, and people in my containers, it's like, when you feel it, you understand this is the power, right? This is the power that people have always been talking about. This is the power that is the biggest power that could be used for something positive, or could be very destructive in the hands of the wrong person or the wrong energy. And so Lady Saturn holds this, like this power, this motivation. It's like, again, you know, a lot of the ways we talk about things now are aimed for a young baby, like soothe its nervous system, like, there, baby, you know, do you want some milk? Whereas actually, this is the part of the feminine. It's like, you're a grown-up, you're a queen. You know, the way that Lady Saturn is, she's teaching you to sword fight, right? She doesn't want you to just fall at the first hurdle. Like, she's making you strong. She's putting you on the right timeline. And she is also teaching you to embody a mistress, and I call it like positive adrenaline states. So you know, when when you feel it, like you're in the zone, you're like on it, you can do anything. It's like a city, like a superpower. And again, in balance, because if you kept with that energy too much, it would burn you out, you know. But without that energy, you're flatlined, you're powerless, you don't have any energy. And so she is like the governess, I say, of this. And I think, you know, it's lovely we're talking about. Then Venus comes in, Venus and Saturn. I just did a money coven, because I'd worked so extensively with Saturn for so many years. We brought the Venusian energy in. We were all like reveling in pinks, like. And I think it's the same again with the moon, because the moon is this incredible teacher of balance. Like, just as you're, you know, full moon peaking, you're the like superpower doer. And then she's taking you down into these more restful, regenerative states. So I do feel like, I always say, I feel these ladies, these great ladies, that are like this magical coven working together for our greatest benefit. And this is part of feminine magic, feminine embodiment, astro embodiment. And we were talking before this about this massive communion between the cosmos and the earth, you know, a reflection, and our body is part of the earth. And so when we become embodied in and mistresses of all these energies, I almost say it's a bit like driving a car. Like, you can really change gears really quickly, but people who aren't trained or initiated or embodied just don't know it exists. They have no access to this, or they can just do the one thing. Like, now I'm the moon energy, now I'm Venus, now I'm Saturn. And I think there is a moment for that when, as I say, I think we all have these like cauldron moments with these ladies. But ultimately, as you're growing into your leadership, your queenship, your power, your tower power, you're getting to a place where you're very efficient and proficient in just changing gears, even from 1 minute to the next. And anyone who has held leadership or held positions of power and responsibilities, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
Like from one, I remember when I worked in, women's media, it would go through like within a day, high creativity, high ideas, having to fire someone and be very severe with them. Someone's crying in your office, they're having a breakdown, you're having to like hold their hand and mother them through it. Someone else needs inspiration. Someone else needs to be reined back in. The money men are on you, needing you to do this thing. The PRs are on the phone. It's like there's so much happening all at once that you have to learn to, move quickly through different qualities of power and leadership and wisdom and embodiment. And so I feel that the stars, and the planets and the cosmos has always been like this great teacher for women.
And that really, really resonates with me. So back before I was an astrologer, I did 12 years in the British rail industry, really high powered, ended up in the
Yeah,
freight industry, very male dominated, but I thrived because that allowed me to be the queen of my own kingdom, to run multi-million pound projects.
yeah, yeah,
Yet we come into doing the work that we do and we forget all the leadership skills that we've been given because it's too male, it's too much for a lot of
yes,
women. And as I'm listening to you, it's like, wow, we're given the training ground in the corporate world to give us
yeah,
all these skills. And actually, it's okay to apply them into our spiritual
yeah,
life because we wouldn't have been given them if we weren't to
yeah,
use them. And I think that was a real conditioning I saw. So I kind of came out of the corporate world during COVID, that there was this conditioning that you can't bring the corporate world into spirituality. And I don't mean making lots of kind of corporate money and having the money men. I mean just the structure, the discipline, the being
yeah,
able to hire, fire,
yeah.
work out a dispute between people. It was kind of very, I found a lot of disassociation. So it's only in the past kind of 6 months I'm starting to come back and realize, and now listening to you, that actually that's okay. That was the reason that we're on this path of deep
Yeah.
female leadership now in the work that we do, because Saturnia has given us the skills to step into this. So yeah, thank you for that, because that
And
was
to,
just
and to merge them, this is this time of this, I say it's like this reconnection of all parts of ourselves, because I feel like, and I've done it, and I know everyone else has done this in the healing journey, because we're pioneering here, right? We've come out of generations that had no access to this when it's been completely destroyed. So we're rebuilding the tower brick by brick. We're pioneering, we're learning by our mistakes, right? We're learning by all the versions of ourselves. And this is what I'm teaching in my current year of M. We're doing an Imrama, and it's the idea of profound quantum transformation in a way that doesn't fracture you. So often what happens is like we have a big transformation and then we're like, that old version of me was basically like shit, put her under the carpet, but then this version of us has another transformation and we go the same way. We judge the old version of ourselves as we leave it. And what we start to do is fracture our power and fracture ourselves, rather than this like very alchemical, integrative, like loving the version of ourselves, knowing it was like perfectly what we were meant to learn, like soaking up all the juice of that and bringing it with us. And it's almost like a moon or a menstrual metaphor. The versions of ourselves that we are letting go of go back down to Mother Earth, into the soil, with gratitude. We release her with love, but we're also those goodies with us, even though they don't seem like they will apply, they will apply. You know, an example of this that I give is that I remember I once had to fire this guy, and he was a really amazing person, and I really loved him. He was a really good man, very talented, and his wife had just had a baby, and he was the breadwinner. And I got lumbered with the task of actually firing him, like no one else wanted to do it. And that was like, it makes me want to cry. That was a really horrible moment in my life, to have to sit in a room with someone you really admire and love and respect, and you know that they have a wife and child at home, and that they're the breadwinner, and that you lured them away from a really well-paying job that they can't get back, right? And he wept and begged, like he like metaphorically got on his knees, because, you know, it was a really painful moment for me and for him. And so we look at that and we can say, well, that's kind of like, that's an example of the kind of things that happen in the old structures that we don't want to repeat. Right. So then what we take across is we're just going to be nice to everyone. We're just going to keep them, even when they're not doing it doesn't work, because the situation with this guy is he was a guy in a women's world, and he couldn't actually channel the woman's voice. You know, and it wasn't working out. So then we say, okay, we just have to be nice. We just have to be kind to everyone. We can't let people go if they're not performing. We can't call people to standards. We can't have a vision that people have to be able to align with so we can achieve the highest outcome. And what I saw when I looked back on that event, that had been like one of those real like I don't want to be doing this kind of thing ever again. What I realized is that the Lady Saturn teaching from it is, if we, you know, us who were the editors, leaders of that world, would have been more precise and more aligned and more disciplined and more knowing when we hired him, we wouldn't have hired him. It was clear to anyone that this person was not going to thrive in this, like, you know, hive of women. So we would have never done it. It would have never happened. He would have stayed in the place that he was happy with, able to provide for his family. And we would have called in the perfect woman that we needed. So this is like this middle way of Lady Saturn, not the bad way. Okay, then maybe the other way is just to have no power, no discernment, no leadership, no blade magic. It's actually, when you're holding those positions, you are, like, an act of devotion is to bring that sense of precision and acumen, to look into the future, to think, is this going to work for everyone? Is this in the best interests of us, you know, the project we're on, the person, you know? And so I love this about Lady Saturn. And for women, it's calling us into this new form of embodied consciousness of our own power, because we are now moving into the era of feminine power. That probably our mothers and grandmothers couldn't occupy, and have not been able to pass that to us in an embodied way.
Really powerful. And I think it's really interesting to reflect on, because Saturn is all about ancestry and lineage as well. in astrology. So it really does tell us, you know, where these ancestral patterns or distortions come in when we look at the birth chart as well. And I was just thinking, as you've been speaking about shifting between all of these really amazing archetypes of, you know, the moon and Saturn and Venus. And I think that's why astrology is such a gift for us, isn't it? Because it can show us how these archetypes manifest in their own unique way through us. You know, maybe our Saturn's in Scorpio, and we, you know, we like that sexy discipline, or, you know, maybe it's, you know, maybe we have the moon in Cancer and we're more attuned to that nourishing energy. So it's just, it's such a skill, as you were saying, to be able to kind of navigate all these different layers of the feminine. And I think
Yes.
astrology just gives us that framework for us to sit in.
That magical map. You know, I was thinking, Maria, because when in 2020, Maria did my chart, and I loved being with Maria, you know, because there's this more feminine holding of astrology, you know, and it, you know, and so, you know, that was one of the things that was really interesting to me, because I knew I have so much Venus energy, you know, and I have a Scorpio moon, so I'm kind of like that energy. But then with you, Maria, we talked a lot about the North Node and South Node that I had not been as familiar with, and that my South Node is in Cancer, which to me is like, for me, is that like that deep connection with the Great Mother. And the way that it's so funny, because Azra, my partner, is a Cancer. And throughout my life, I've always dated Cancers. I always say, like, what is this? Like any guy, it's a Cancer. You know, I'm just very, very attracted to that kind of energy. Makes sense that, you know, this like very people who are very in tune with this feminine, mermaidy Great Mother energy. But then my North Node is Capricorn, so which is this Lady Saturn energy, and this again beautiful balance between the two part, like the full moon and the dark moon, you know, the giving mother and the disciplining mother, the expansion and the contraction, and how, you know, I will always be anchored in this devotion to the Great Mother, to the great waters of the feminine. That's my home. That's where my roots are absorbed in. But that tree is also growing into an amazing epic expression of feminine bitchcraft.
It's great.
Pioneered by Capricorn and Lady Saturn, you know, and you know, and it's something that as women, just we've been so conditioned to be the all-giving mother, you know, and it's so needed not to go the extreme opposite, but to just come into the balance with it, to come into the alchemy of it, and to experiment, you know, at both ends of the spectrum. But yeah, I love that about, you know, the chart. And then what I really loved about it is that then Orthea, my daughter, who is a double Scorpio, and she was actually, as it was looking, was gonna be born on Halloween and be a triple Scorpio. And then I threw myself on the floor at the mercy of the Great Mother and said, please no. And then she came in with a Virgo and 2 Scorpio. And I am always like, thank Goddess for that Virgo. But what's interesting about her is that she's the opposite. She has Capricorn South Node and Cancer North Node, and that is really in play in our relationship. Like with her, I am very much ocean mummy, and she is a little Lady Saturn through and through. And we just kind of teach each other and have this relationship. And I remember I also did with Maria the chart for my mom, who is passed. And so, you know, if anyone has not done that, it was amazing for me, like an incredible reconciliation to do the chart of your mother, whether she's alive or she's left this world, because she is your matrix, she is the womb that birthed you, and all of that architecture, you know, planetary architecture in her is what created you. And that was really powerful for me, and just to be able to like pull out and see my mom from this more cosmic perspective rather than, you know, like when we're in it with our moms, it's like, you did this and you did that and you got that wrong. Poor moms. Now I'm a mom. I'm like, to see it in this, you know, bigger context, and how like she had, if I remember, like quite a difficult, you know, you could see that her lifetime had been quite painful, and and that also she was also a very mystical person, trapped in the life of a housewife in Yorkshire. You know, that was my experience of her, like a housewife in Yorkshire. You know, I mean, she did work as well when I was older, but she was not a career woman, you know. And but she was a poet, and she was very mystical, and she would say things like, when I was a child we had to imagine the edge of the universe or the edge of infinity. She had a lot of Sagittarius. You know, so it was just like amazing to actually, you know, especially after her death, get to know her through her chart, and then see how her chart worked with my chart, because I do feel that there is like preconception, some like massive astrological conference happening, and other traditions say that too. So I studied with a teacher in the Shaivite tradition in the Himalayas, and his teacher, Babaji, was like a classic, you know, a sadhu with the, you know, dreadlocks down to his knees. He had walked across India for like 30 years, an ascetic, and finally he was in his 70s when I knew him. He was, you know, they're very revered. He had a small little ashram on a confluence of rivers, and he was like the chief sadhu for this section of the Himalayas. He did a lot of the death rites and the birth rites and the astrology for like when, you know, who should get married, like auspicious birth dates or conception dates, like when people should be, you know, have the death rites. And I never really got into that with him, you know, that was not something he taught, but that was something he practiced for the community. And so in that world, like the gnosis of the cosmos and astrology, and how we're in this kind of great interweaving of energy, was really like a high priority, and of how like your chart would interact with someone else's chart, you know. But obviously with a partner we could choose that, but I do believe that with our family at a spirit level we also choose that.
Absolutely. I can almost imagine Saturn overseeing that, those kind of lines of ancestry. We often associate her with spinning and weaving and the kind of Norn archetype as well, those kind of real threads of fate and destiny, because she does also rule over Aquarius as well as Capricorn. So she is the kind of ancient ruler of the new aeon as well. So as we're talking about this Saturnian energy and these energies of lineage and things that are passed down through the mothers and daughters, and how we weave together with each other, it feels so Aquarian as well. It
Yes,
feels
I
like
love
this,
that.
this
Yeah.
magic is coming
And
through.
it's that idea that's very Saturnian, that the new age can only be born from the primordial womb.
Absolutely.
And again, this transformation that is held in connection and integrity and reverence, not the fracturing of like judgment, like, hey, I'm off to the new era, you know, this you know, can just it's like to weave it all together. And it's really interesting, and I will bring this in here. It's like it was interesting for me to start to teach about Lady Saturn, and also I've taken a lot of women through a recapitulation of their Saturn's return. So, you know, and this idea that it's when she returns, when you're 28, that's when your maidenhood ends, ready or not, like it or not. And I wish we would have been told that in our generations, right? Because like my Saturn's return hit me like a big like blade frisbee, decapitated me. Like, what the F is going on, you know? And so now in my work, some women are just going through their Saturn's return, and it's so incredible to be able to hold them in this feminine initiatory space and be the elder that they need. Some women have just been through, so they're in the aftermath, and they're in this really amazing place to like to understand that they're being initiated into their power. They're not being punished, they're not being disciplined, they're moving from maiden to woman. Their time where life is their playground is over. Now they're moving into structure again, like it or not, this is what's happening. And Lady Saturn is teaching them about precision and life path, so that's very useful. But you know, also to see all the women in their 40s and 50s and 60s being able to go back and recapitulate this event that happened, that often changed the trajectory of their life, often held really painful moments and lessons that they had not really been able to fully suck the juice out of, because it's like in shadow, because no one understands that Lady Saturn is the woman who comes to us, is the energy who comes to us when we are ready to transition from maiden to womanhood. And she's different to the mother archetype. Like, she'll take us all the way through to perimenopause and menopause. And she is like the force that initiates us into our leadership, queenship, eldership. And yeah, so that's been really fascinating to see how much energy women have tied up in their Saturn's return, you know, how much that needs excavating and reclaiming.
Absolutely. I think it's a key moment in our lives. And Saturn is, for me, it's very well, she is the mistress of time. She is what they call the great chronicator, which we love that word. But she is like your kind of cosmic clock coming back around every 28 years, but also making squares and oppositions every 7 years. So it's almost like we get these check-ins from Saturn to say,
how's it
how,
going?
yeah, have you mastered this yet? Have we done
Yeah,
this?
how far have you veered?
Oh, no, you haven't. Here you go.
Yeah.
But you know what I love about her? That is her quality to move you from confusion into clarity. And when you're in clarity, you can succeed at anything. When you're in confusion, how no matter how talented you are, how much you try, confusion has a unmagnetic, uncreative energy, whereas clarity has this like amazing pop to it. It's like, you know, you move, you create, you structure, it happens. And it is interesting, you know, again, that was when I was receiving all this from ladies. I wasn't an astrologer. I didn't have access to astrologers who were saying anything but like it's some shady old man, you know. And that was the again the the quality that she transmitted, because I studied in my younger days in India a lot under Kali. And I said, for me, it's this aspect of Kali that is the blackness, the time, Kal, the womb of time. You know, there's an aspect of Kali that is hot and fiery and decapitating people and red. But there is this other aspect of Kali that's very cool and very yin, and is time and emptiness and karma. I mean, she's actually karma as well. And to me, karma is like the architecture of energy, you know. And I said, that's, you know, this is what Lady Saturn feels like to me. And it was interesting because one of the ladies in one of my containers had been studying with a Sufi mystic, and she said that he had said that to her, that Kali is Saturn, And she said she had never heard, and that was one of those ancient teachings of those lineages, and that she had never heard, and that was said to her privately in like a deep, kind of container, and that she had never heard anyone say it outside of that moment. And she was like thrilled, because she was like, now I feel like this is like double confirmation from like two ways I'm working. And yeah, and I always, for me with Carly, she was always that mother, that like womb that you just rest in, the womb of time. It's like she's got you. It's like she's been with you through everything, through it all. She's seen the beginning and she's seen the end. It's very Sophianic in the Western traditions. It's wisdom. Again, this transition we make from the innocence of the maiden to the wisdom of the elder, or the initiated leader, queen, woman. And Lady Saturn is all about this. And there's like a bittersweetness about it too, I think. There's a great depth to it, but there's a bittersweetness, because you do have to let go of like the fancies of childhood, the when you're a maiden and it's just all green shoots and hope, and you don't get confronted with the full story of the patterns. And I think that's where we are as a collective with women. We've almost been trapped in an artificial maidenhood for so long now, that we are ready for this. And so I guess I also do a lot of grief work, because I do believe that Lady Saturn presides over grief, paradoxically. And she's the kind of grief worker that doesn't give you a hug.
How rude.
I know. She will just be filing her nails as you weep on the floor of the darkest cave at the depth of the womb of earth. And that's exactly how you want to be held in your power. And she's this great mistress of grief, of letting go of the maiden, letting go of the things that no longer served, letting go of the paths that weren't really leading anywhere but felt good, and taking you into this great wisdom, this great cosmic knowledge, this great weaving of time, so you can literally ascend to the throne of your power. I mean, she's like, what's not to love? she's like, yeah, she's the great lady of our era, this new era.
And for me as well, it's almost as if she's giving us another layer as well. So we're quite used to maiden, mother, crone, but to me
Yes.
it's like maiden, mother, sorceress, crone.
Yes.
And it's just kind of ushering us, particularly as really strong female leaders, into this sorceress kind of
Exactly.
phase where we are gathering community, where we're working the magic, where we're going deeper than any other generations have gone before, because we have access, one, to more information, but we're also awakening that kind of really deep power that we've hidden for so long. So I'm kind of seeing that kind of sexy Dita Von Teese is becoming like a new iteration of kind of the Saturnian's ascension, essentially, into this kind of reclaim
Yeah.
your power, girls, into this sorceress that we all need to embody as we go into this new aeon.
Exactly. And it's like this sense of, and this is why I call it feminine magic, like woman as magician, not just as mother, not just as maiden, not just as elder, in a sense of like, but as a magician, as a power holder. And then in my containers, I also work with the enchantress as like the highest octave of this, because there's all these different layers we can embody. For me, queenship is leadership. Like I always say, there's like people, queenship, the maiden thinks that queenship is like wearing a fancy crown and a fancy frock and everyone applauding you. The reality of queenship is it's really hard work. It's like you're looking after a queendom. There's a lot of structure, a lot of responsibility, a lot of work there. And then for me, this Lady Saturn, she's like the special source of the magic, the power. And then for me, the Enchantress is so when people first connect to Lady Saturn, they can go all in, like their inner Dom comes out. They're like, take me to the black leather cat suit. You know? And
Saturday
it's
nights for us, love.
Yeah.
I know, exactly. It's like it is. It's like, you know, this like the full flow of bitchcraft is just like the dam is released. And then and then we say then there is a moment when that is more mistress, that you can hold it more lightly. And this is when I say the diamond frequency comes in. And again, just looking at the backdrop, we have this black night and these diamond stars. And so the diamond star is the Enchantress when we're not as heavy-handed with this magic. We're not whipping our way through the world and with our big black stiletto, though sometimes we need that. There's a softness, but not the softness of the maiden or the mother. It's like it's a glowing, it's an aura, it's like the Enchantress. It's like she's radiant, she's beautiful, you know, she's still not your good mommy or your, you know, like little maiden, but there is, and so I use the word elegance to describe that. There is more of an elegance there. And I think we know that as women, as we go through our journey, you know, once you first discover the idea that you can just say what you mean and tell your truth, like women often go into this like whiplash truth telling phase that's not always very elegant. And then you kind of repattern, you know, you kind of come back and think, I don't know how well that worked out for me, you know. And then you get to elegance, which again is an aspect of Lady Saturn, precision, elegance, but that way that in that wisdom, that elegance of the initiated woman, you know when to say the right thing. Like, you know that sometimes the truth does not have to come at people like a blade, you know, that sometimes silence is the greatest form of truth. Like, you have access to all these different tools. And yeah, and so I think that there is this great elegance. And I don't know if that's just part of Lady Saturn, like that's her crowning, that's like this diamond frequency, because again, I feel like we see the cosmos with these sparkling stars, and then in the earth there's this dark blackness, but there's these like these crystals there, the terrestrial stars, and crystals are very structural. They hold memory, they hold information, they hold ancestral codes, they hold planetary history. So yeah, I think that's kind of like the highest frequency of Lady Saturn. And I do think it has an element of moon energy too, but I think the moon energy of this is more glowing, more benevolent than the diamond frequency. Like, diamond is quite a cold frequency if you feel it. And sometimes we need to learn to be cold as women.
Absolutely. In the kind of the trainings that we do with astrology, with the Star Priestess training, one of our overlighting archetypes is Ariane Rod,
Oh
who
yes,
is
yes, exactly.
the
Yeah.
star and the stone, and she is like a cold mother, and you hear her mythology, and she is branded as this, you know, wicked, cruel mother, but we know it's a story of initiation. She's initiating her son into his own power. And for me, she holds this very Saturnian frequency. So
Yes,
just as you were,
yeah, I love that you brought that in. In fact, back right when I think back in 2012, when, you know, a lot of my work was first coming through in a way where it moved from my own journey into a way of let's form or structure this for it to go forward into the public. I was taken into the Arwanath traditions, and that was the journey, was to meet Ariane Rod in the north. And I remember when I finally came to it, I was just weeping, sobbing, bawling, snotting, the whole thing. Like, this is my mother. You know, it's like, she is the one, you know, for me, she is the one. And of course, the bards were taken into Arianrhod's spinning tower for 7 years to receive their magic, their medicine. So again, this is tower magic, you know. The and this is what I teach as women. We're told that the tower is bad or it's destroyed. Like you get the tower card in the tarot, and you're like, oh no. But actually, the tower represents in our consciousness now the way feminine power has been destroyed, the way the feminine as the initiatrix of spiritual avatars, that's been leveled. Whereas we see this in stories such as Merlin, that he was actually initiated in the tower of Arianrhod, in her, to me it's like her diamond Saturnian cosmic womb.
That's beautiful.
Very beautiful. And it's so interesting to me how these archetypes are revealing themselves in this Aquarian, Saturnian new aeon that we're moving into. I think for me, it feels very important for the collective to be able to touch and receive that frequency through such amazing embodied women as yourself. So thank you for sharing your knowledge about Saturn Revelations.
Thank you for all your knowledge, and you know, and for our connection in 2020, which was really helpful for me to start to put it together in a language of astrology, but that before I had not really been able to interface with that world, because it's such a, you know, kind of, there's a lot of bro astro out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely a field where the patriarchal energies have kind of infiltrated quite deeply. And as you were saying at the beginning, you know, it's a deep mystery that was hidden from us, and particularly from women.
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw a male astrologer. I knew he'd read my stuff, and then he wrote this. He was really angry with what I was saying, and it was interesting because, you know, his take was Saturn is not. Saturn is about the destruction of structure, right? You know, and it was like, it was interesting, and and that had made him so angry that I had said Saturn was the governess of structure, because for him, in his world, Saturn is what dissolves things or dismantles them or destroys them. And I was like, it's interesting because you see in the full architecture of the womb, she is only dismantling, it's like menstruation, she is only dismantling and destroying when it's time for something new to be born, or when something is not working or has come out of alignment. But that is not all the womb does. Like she has, like, she is the structural mistress of creation. She births and she creates and she forms and she dismantles and she destroys. And so I could just see how the maybe for men it's just harder to really fully understand that incredible architecture of creation that is held in the womb, and both her birth portal and her death portal and her ability to build structure and dismantle structure. And that's kind of the missing piece in the conversation about Lord Saturn, that now he is just death and destruction and tearing things down, you know, which I guess there's something appropriate for the era we're in. But if we just focus on that without the wisdom of creation and restructuring and building and calling in and birthing the new era, we're just going to get lost in like a conspiracy rabbit hole that's going to eat us alive. You know, so we've got to start, and this is what I'm really interested in, start to build the new structure from the new womb of the primordial goddess for a new era.
Very
beautiful.
Mm.
Seren, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on our podcast. We will, of course, put all your links on our show notes. Have you got any courses coming up at all that people might want to join?
I do a course called Sacral Wealth, which is a 3-month, and it's to create a brand, launch your business, B, enter the new queenship of structural wealth. And so I will be running one of those soon, and there's going to be a special edition of that. And I have a Substack, Enchantress of Elmet, and you can find me at my website, serenbertrand.com. And yeah, I'll keep everyone updated. I've always got something stewing in my cauldron. I
And of
don't
course we
always
can.
have a menu, if you know what I mean. I'm always serving something, but I don't always have a menu.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. We can also find you on Instagram. We'll make sure that everyone can find you
Okay.
on the show notes. Again, Seren, it's been a pleasure. Maria, as always, it's been fun. Thank you both so much, and to everyone listening, we will be back with a new episode very soon. Lots of love and take care.